All right, so we're going to take some notes over accentuate the negative, section 2.1 and 2.2. Okay, because the next time we are together, you will be having a quiz over that. Okay, you will be able to use your notes on the quiz, so make sure you do a nice job of writing things down accurately and in a way that you can see them, okay, and read them. All right, so let's go ahead and write AN at the top for accentuate the negative, and then this will be on investigation uh, 2.1 and 2.2. Okay. All right, so just to note, when I do my drawings, if I color one in like that, this is going to equal a positive. Okay, and one of these colored in, I'm going to have that equal a negative. Okay. All right, so one of the first things that we did was we figured out how do you show, so how do you show addition on a chipboard? Okay. So, and basically the method that you're going to use with chips to show addition is you're going to put on the first number, then put on the second number, then simplify if needed. Okay, so and you can simplify by removing those zero pairs. So let's look at a couple examples. Let's say that we were trying to model with chips -3 plus -5. Okay, and here's our chipboard. All right, I'm going to put on the first number. What's the first number? -3. Then I'm going to put on the second number. What's the second number? -5. Okay. All right. Are there any simplifications or zeros that we have to pairs to take off? They're not. So all I'm going to do is count up what's on my chipboard, and the solution of this is going to equal -8. Okay. All right. Let's try another one. Let's say I had -5 plus +2. Okay, I'm going to put on 5 negatives. And then I'm going to put on 2 positives. Okay, and then I'm going to look at what's the value. Well, I'm going to notice that this is a zero pair, and here's another zero pair. So I could go ahead and I could remove those 2 zero pairs. Okay, and then what's left on my board? Okay, so I'm left with 3 red chips, so this is equal to -3. So think put on the first number, put on the second number, remove any zeros if there are any. Okay. All right, so we played around with that for a while and came up with some adding rules, okay? Because we really need the rules if we're trying to do some problems that aren't reasonable to do with chips, like we've got some numbers that would require a lot of chips, or maybe if we've got some fractions or decimals, it's going to be helpful to just know some rules. Okay, so the second big thing that we came over, what are the adding rules? Okay, so and when we thought about that in class, the rules that we came up with, we kind of looked at like group 1 problems and group 2 problems when we did this activity. And either we came up with problems that had the same signs, okay, like for instance, -2 plus -3 or +6 plus +3, so same signs. Or we did a second category of different signs. Okay. And let's say we had negative 10 plus positive 5, or positive 20 plus negative 6, or even just, maybe some more difficult ones. So let's say we had positive 12.6 plus negative 20.8. Okay, so all of these rules would work for either same signs in that group or maybe different signs. So let's go back to the same signs. So if they're either both negative or both positive, the strategy we came up with in class was to ignore the signs. Okay, so kind of forget if they're positive or negative. Just think about them as like a number of chips, but not necessarily a color. And then we added like normal. Okay, and then we just kept whatever the original signs were. So we're going to keep the original signs. Okay, so like negative 2 plus negative 3, so ignore the signs, just think 2 and 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. Keep the original sign, it's negative 5. 6 plus 3, 9. Keep original sign, it's positive 9. Okay, different signs though, what we did is we ignored the signs. So we just thought, all right, I'm just going to work with the numbers 10 and 5. Okay, so we ignore the signs. Okay. And then we like subtracted like normal. Okay, so subtract. Okay, like subtraction like the unit in elementary school. So I'm going to take 10 and 5 and subtract them. When I subtract these two, ignoring the signs, I just get 5. So if I ignore the signs and subtract those, I get 14. If I ignore the signs and subtract these, I get 8.2. Okay, so then I'm going to use the sign of the number further from 0. Oops. Okay, so like on these two, which number was further from 0? 10. So the answer is going to be negative 5. For these, which one's further from 0? It's 20. So the answer is going to be positive 14. For these, the number that's further from 0 is negative 20.8. So it's going to be negative, 8.2 is our answer. Okay. All right. So again, you should be working in your journal. Okay. I'm just doing it on paper because it's a little easier to see if it's flat. So I need another page. All right, so that was how to add with chips. We also did some subtraction. Okay, so here's our third sort of big idea. So how do you show subtraction on a chipboard? Okay. All right, so basically our strategy was to put on the first number and then cross off, take off the second number. Okay, now hint, okay, sometimes you can't cross off the second number, so hint, you may have to add zeros. Okay, so 0 pair. So remember, we did those in class, so 0 pair is just a positive and a negative. Okay, those two together make a 0 pair. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. Let's say I've got negative 5, take away negative 3. Okay, so that means I'm going to put on negative 5, and I'm going to try and take off negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to put on negative 5. And I'm going to try and take off negative 3. So take off 3 red ones. Do I have 3 red ones I can take off? Sure. So I'm going to just cross them off. So what's left? What's not crossed off? Okay, I've got 2 reds, so the answer to this one is going to be negative 2. Okay, let's try this one. Negative 3, take away positive 2. Okay, so I'm going to put on 3 negatives. Okay, I want to take off 2 positives. Do I have any positives on here to take off? Nope. All right, so I got to add 0 pairs. So how many 0 pairs do I need to add until I have 2 positives? Well, that's 1 0 pair. That's not enough. So I'm going to add another one. Okay, now that should be enough that I could take off my 2 black ones. So I'm going to cross those off. What's left not crossed off would be -5. Okay, we're going to draw one more. Just a second here. Okay, let's say we had positive 4 take away positive 6. Okay, so I'm going to start with 6 positives. Oh, sorry, not 6. Goodness gracious. 4 positives. Sorry. And then I want to take away 6 positives. Okay, well, I only have 4. So I'm going to add some 0 pairs. Okay, don't go too crazy on 0 pairs. How many 0 pairs do I actually need so I can take off 6 positives? Okay, I just need 2 of them, okay? So don't add 6 zeros because I really only need 2 because I already had some of those positives. So now I'm going to take off my 6 positives. Okay, and what's left? I should be left with 2 negatives, the 2 reds, so -2. Okay, so then we figured, so what are the subtracting rules? Okay, so the subtracting rules. So basically we kind of did the same thing as on the adding rules that we looked in 2 groups. So they either had the same signs or maybe different signs. Okay, and the subtracting rules are pretty tricky compared to the adding, quite a bit harder. Okay, so the same signs, let's say like you had -5 minus -10. Those are the same signs, or +6 minus +8. Okay, or even like -12.5 minus -8.4. So same signs. Okay, you either are subtracting 2 negatives or 2 positives versus different signs. So different signs would be like, let's say I had +6 minus -8, or if I had -8 minus +2, okay, or even with a decimal amount, so -12.4 minus +20.7, so different signs. So, what did I basically do if the signs were the same? Okay, so the rules we came up with in class were that we ignored the signs. Okay. And then we kind of did our normal like subtraction of just, whatever the larger number minus the smaller, ignoring the signs would be. Okay. So like we're going to just ignore the signs. So I've got 5 and 10. I'm going to subtract those. That gives me 5. So I'll subtract these. I get 2. So if I ignore the signs and subtract those, I'd get 4.1. So just ignoring the signs. But then it was kind of tricky to figure out what the sign was. Okay. If originally you had a bigger number minus a smaller number, okay, because this is actually smaller, right? Then if you end up having a bigger number minus a smaller number, the answer ended up equaling positive. Okay, so like in this one, bigger minus smaller, I'm going to end up getting +5. Okay. If I had a smaller number minus a bigger number, the answer actually ended up going into the negatives. So, like in this one, the difference between those two numbers, ignoring the sign, was 2, but this number was smaller, this was bigger, so I ended up had to go into the negatives, I get -2. Okay. How about on this one? I've got a smaller minus a bigger. So after I ignore the signs and subtract and get my 4.1, okay, since the bigger number was second, this would actually be negative 4.1. Okay, so a little bit trickier than the adding rules. Okay, different signs. Okay, so if I had a negative and a positive, we figured out with the chips the general pattern that was happening is that we ignore the signs. Okay, and instead of subtracting, we actually ended up, after we ignore the signs, we are going to add. Okay, like sort of normal. Okay, so we're going to do addition. So I'm going to ignore these signs. So I'm just going to take the number 6 and 8 and add them, and I get 14. Okay, and this one I ignore the signs. 8 and 2, I get 10. Ignore the signs. I'm going to get what? Negative 33.4. Okay, and then how do I decide what the sign is? Okay, so we figured out that take the sign of the first number. Okay. All right. So this one's just going to be positive. So ignore the signs. It should be positive 14. Ignore the signs. We've got 8 plus 2. So that makes 10. First number is negative, so it's going to be negative 10. Ignore the signs. We're going to add those two together. So that's 33.4, right? So, and the first one's negative, so it's negative 33.4. Okay, so that's how we could have solved these. So ignore the signs when they're different, take the sign of the first number. Okay, kind of tricky, isn't it? Okay, but those are the subtracting rules. Okay, one other topic that you're going to need to know is that we also mentioned the commutative property. Okay, so we found out that the commutative property works for addition, but not subtraction. Okay. So, and that basically says that if we take two numbers like 2 plus 3, we can reverse them 3 plus 2, and we're going to get the same answer. So, works with negative numbers too. So, say I had negative 5 plus negative 10, I could reverse the order. Okay. And I'm going to get the same answer. Okay. So, order doesn't matter in addition. Okay. So, but it does in subtraction. If I do 5 minus 3, that's not the same answer as 3 minus 5. You actually get opposites. Okay. So you got to be really careful when you're subtracting that you follow the order. Okay. So same thing if they're negative. So say I've got negative 10 minus negative 5. That is not the same answer as negative 5 minus negative 10. So you cannot mix the order. Okay. In subtraction, okay, but you can in addition. Okay, so that's the end of our notes. Make sure you keep that in a safe spot and you remember to bring your notebook the next class.